Today, on this episode of The Crossover, we will be discussing what it takes to win the Heisman with Heisman Trophy winner, NCAA national champion, and NFL quarterback Gino Torretta. Learn how one of the most decorated college football players of all time broke nearly every passing record in school history, won the national championship, and landed the most coveted collegiate athletic award as the nation's top player. Much more on this episode of The Crossover.
We're going to talk about today. We all know that the Heisman Trophy is awarded it's the most prestigious award really in all of collegiate sports. It's the one that's known really outside of football. Just discuss the importance of what the Heisman Trophy meant to you and your teammates, more than just a regular award, but just the significance of it.
Well, I think going back when I got a chance to start 4 games in 1989 when Craig Erickson broke his hand and I was a redshirt freshman, I broke the school record for passing in a game in my second start. And one of the newspapers, I don't know if it was Miami Herald or USA Today, was like, well, what about this guy for the Heisman? He's, played a couple games. He's already breaking Miami's school records of, Kozar and Testaverde, all those guys. He just beat their records. So then Cortez Kennedy, rest his soul, he in practice started calling me Mr. Heisman as a freshman. I was like, come on, Tez, that's a little premature, but
no pressure.
No pressure. Yeah, no pressure at all. And I think that when you came to Miami, or at least when I came to Miami, it was national championship or bust. And when your team is successful individually, there's going to be players on the team that are up for awards. And so when, I came in 1988 and, I started 4 games at that redshirt freshman year and then started my last 2, my junior and senior year. But after we won the national championship in 91, my junior year, and we returned a lot of our team, I was like, man, we got a chance to basically repeat, which would have been, our third title in 5 years. And I was like, I think all of us, a lot of, besides me, Michael Barrow, Darren Smith, Jesse Armstead, guys on the defense, we all had a chance to win individual awards. And we thought that, hey, if we're successful, then we're going to win these things. We're going to try to have a clean sweep. And so I think my teammates knew that. And I think that you want the success, when you're playing a team sport like football, I think you want the success of individuals. You want individuals to be recognized on your team because as a teammate, you did your job. You prepared and practiced. You were able to win all or most of your games. And it was just a culmination of, God, I think I came in with about 25 players my freshman year: Lamar Thomas, Darrell Spencer, Coleman Bell, Mario Cristobal, Kip Vickers, Michael Barrow, Darren Smith, Ryan McNeil, all 50-year seniors. And, it was kind of a culmination of, man, this was all hard work and we all enjoyed it. They wanted nothing more than success of me individually because they knew as a team we would be successful. But, it's just you don't know how a Heisman Trophy race is going to go. Look at this season. There's probably 8 players that legitimately have a chance, and it's going to come down to the last few weeks of how they play in big games. You don't know, if somebody's going to, have a season like Johnny Manziel or Tim Tebow as a sophomore or young player, and you're like, wow, this guy, he came and did it. I think that, like, for me, it was, partly, hey, it was my 5th year. We'd had a lot of success and it was consistent. And I knew that was going to be a factor in me having a chance to win the award was consistency and great individual performance that had accumulated over time. But we all enjoyed it. I can remember after I won the end of the weekend, bringing the trophy, flying back down to Miami with it. That was interesting, putting it in the flight attendant's closet. that was the only place on a plane that it would fit, and they would let it come onto the plane. So brought it back in, put it on our strength coach desk, and and those guys all had a part of it, whether they were on the scout team or whether they were 5-year senior, 5th-year seniors with me.
Awesome. I mean, it is such a team award. You know, it goes to one person, but of course it is the team. But, you know, speaking of yourself, people talk about the Heisman being like the Rhodes Scholarship. It follows you for the rest of your life. Is that true? Have you felt like every time you do something, every time you meet someone, that must be the first thing out of their mouth?
Oh, I don't think there's any question. I mean, it's undefeated. I would probably say that, because once you bring up Heisman Trophy, it doesn't matter if you're a football fan, college football fan, or, you know, just a average sports fan, or not even an average sports fan. I think that most everybody knows what the Heisman Trophy is and what it signifies. I think that even if they don't know what it signifies, they know the award and they know the name. And I think there's no question it follows you. It is a door opener, and people will always open the door. Or, you know, if I make a phone call, hey, you know, I'm trying to do something here, and people will listen. And I think that you know, it's just a tremendous, you know, I look at it as the winners are part of college football history. And that year, people can go, okay, Bo Jackson won the Heisman Trophy in '85, and they can remember, okay, well, Chuck Long was also up at Iowa, you know, and they remember the course of that season. But I think it's kind of the linchpin is, okay, who won the Heisman Trophy that year? Who won the national championship? And it's kind of all of that together. And I like to say, you know, I think it's special from the standpoint of me and the other winners that we all had that magical season, individually and as a team. And we were all about the same age. We were all, you know, 21 to 23. Not Wanky, he was 28 because he, you know, had to go play pro baseball first. But you know, we were all about the same age. We're, you know, early 20s. Don't we know what we're doing playing football? Don't really know anything else. And we had a great and magical season. And I think that that's what's so special, that why we can all get along, you know, now, whether, you know, guy won it in his 60, you know, in the 50s or the 60s. And, you know, Jay Berwinger won the first one in 35, was alive when I won it. So, you know, I think that's to me, what's so special is you're part of the history of the game. And I'd argue the best game. I mean, you know, it's just the emotions of it and what it does for each university, not just Miami with me, or, you know, Desmond Howard at Michigan, or Matt Leinart at USC. It's what the game of football and then the Heisman Trophy Award does to the entire university alumni base and program is just awesome. It's awesome to be a part of.
Let me ask you a couple questions about that year. What was the most critical play that year for you? Can you remember?
Well, I might say the first one, because Hurricane Andrew wiped out Homestead in Miami in the middle of our two-a-days.
That's right.
So I can remember, you know, I lived in the Grove at the time, in Coconut Grove, and my wife now, Bernadette, we were dating then, and she said, "What are you guys doing about the storm?" Well, when you're in the middle of two-a-days, you don't turn on the TV. It was, you got up at 6 and you were at practice, and you took a break for lunch, went to practice, went and watched meetings, you went home and you slept. And I literally said, "What are you talking about?" And I can remember turning on the news, and Brian Norcross was like, "Okay, if this storm doesn't deviate, people will die in South Florida." And I mean, that was like the first thing I heard. I'm like, "Oh my God," you know. And then I'm like, I called our trainer, and, you know, the first response was, "Well, we got to see if it's just high winds first." I'm like, well, I don't think this guy would be saying death if it's not way more than high winds. And then, you know, our coaching staff is from the Pacific Northwest, so they hadn't been a part of a hurricane. I'm from Northern California. I'd never been a part of a hurricane, whether young or old, or anybody affected ever by a hurricane. And it was kind of like, well, we were supposed to have a scrimmage Saturday morning, and literally it was like, well, let's just batten down the hatches, and you know, basically it was kind of like good luck. And
Wow.
and I remember we came in for the scrimmage in the morning, and I mean, there was like the food trucks on Green Tree practice field over at the Hecht, and literally like they were like, okay, no scrimmage. Good luck. We won't have practice or anything until Tuesday. And it was like, wherever you guys can go, go. Because,
Wow.
there was guys that were locally, guys from out of state, some guys stayed on campus. I actually, fortunately, one of my roommates was from Palm Beach. So we literally just got in a car and drove. It took us 3 or 4 hours just to drive to Palm Beach back then. And so we went with, okay, where are we going to practice? I mean, because Coral Gables, I mean, there was boats on the street in the Grove. I mean, it was just awful. And they were like, okay, we're going to go to Vero Beach and practice at Dodgertown. So we were using a baseball facility to practice for football. So we were there the entire time. Like we didn't, I remember I got a cell phone. I don't even want to tell you what the bill was back then for minutes on a cell phone, in 1992. But I had a cell phone, and it was just, we were practicing up there, really had no tie. And then we went on the road to Iowa, our first game, and they were, I think, top 15. And we pounded them pretty good. But, I mean, I think the first play was because we didn't know. I mean, when your town gets wiped out and then you come back to the, when we had a home game, and there had to be, God, 15,000 National Guard members in the open end of the Orange Bowl, and you realize like what what a tremendous undertaking was going on in Miami to try to just basically pick it up from rubble. And I think that that, and then just our games, and then even the Dolphins game, it was like that was kind of a rallying point of everybody locally. It was kind of their day or their 3 hours to not have to deal with the effects of the storm or trying to deal with any of that, and dealing with us, and hopefully, and we ended up winning all of our games and going undefeated. But that first game was was kind of touch and go after the storm.
Yeah, I mean, that was, arguably the biggest hurricane in the history of Florida. I mean,
well, wiped out a lot of insurance companies.
Yeah,
that's
so the
for
fact
sure.
that you
I mean, at that
guys,
point in time, it was the biggest ever in the country, based on just on volume. But and when it went a little bit south of us in Homestead, because I mean, they had kind of calculated like every little bit, if that eye of the storm hit in Brickell or downtown Miami, and it was just like it kept going up in the cost and the damage. But it was enough damage that it was just it was one thing that I learned at that point in time. If one of those is coming anywhere near us, I don't even bother waiting. See you later.
that's, I mean, nowadays they have warnings,
Yeah,
a full week ahead of time, as opposed to the food trucks telling you to run for your life. That's
exactly.
kind of
Your life is way more important than anything you got in your house. Get out of town.
What was the toughest team you guys played that year?
I'd probably say obviously Florida State. We hit a stretch in '92 where we played Arizona in the Orange Bowl, and we only beat them 8-7. And that was back when they started their Desert Swarm defense, which had Teddy Bruschi, Waldrop, Ty Partons. They had a bunch of guys that were all American on their defense, and nobody heard of it. And obviously Arizona, it compared to the East Coast, I was like, oh, people don't play good football in the Pac-12. We knew different, and we played them. Then we played Penn State on the road, and then we played Florida State at home, and it was basically our 3 toughest games right in a row. Defensively, it was brutal, and really, back then the national championship went through us or Florida State. It went through the state of Florida. Whoever won the state championship, Florida didn't play us, but whoever kind of, if we beat Florida State 4 out of 5 years and won 2 titles and played for 3, so the championship went through us. I mean, just the speed of that game. I can remember the opening kickoff, they ran it back 97 yards for a touchdown. Didn't think that was a great way to start the game, because we didn't need to let them have 6 points before we even started the game.
Yeah.
But that game ended up being wide right 2. but that was hard. But they were all hard. I mean, Iowa presented things to us that we didn't do. You know, Arizona. I mean, essentially, they missed a 52-yarder field goal at the end, and they could have beaten us. They were all hard, as it seems like back then. But Florida State being wide right 2, and at the end of that string of 3 games where, I mean, physically I was getting hammered. That was,
Long
but
year.
those were memorable. Yes, they were.
If you could summarize in one word or one sentence, what made that team so special?
Belief. We believe we were going to win. Florida State, I think after my junior, we beat them, and that was wide right 1, and one of their players said, we knew we had the better team. They knew they were going to win. And I think that for any team sport, any sport really, it comes down to, first and foremost, you got to believe that you're going to do everything you can and you're going to win. And I think we all did that. And it may not have been pretty at times, or may not have been where we just kicked everybody's tail, but we found a way every single game to win, whether that was a defensive guy making a play or us, or even a special teams, a big time return against Penn State. Kevin Williams returned a kick for a touchdown. And, it was just belief every week that we knew we did everything we could in preparation. And we knew we practiced harder than everybody in the country, but we just believed we were going to win every game. Might have been, I don't know, might have been naivete and stupidity as a young kid, but we believed we were going to win.
I mean, I think it goes to show you that they always say sports is obviously physical, but a lot of it is mental. And if you're coached well and you believe in yourself as a player and as a team, that is almost as important as the physical component. And you guys obviously reflect that. You were the Heisman Trophy kind of front runner, and talk about the media and the scrutiny and the pressure that mounts with every single game as you continue to do well with the media and all of the coverage that comes around. I'm sure it's even more intense now because of social media and the way it works, but even back then, describe the pressure that was building up over game after game.
Well, I think the fortunate thing for me at Miami, having obviously been in a long line of quarterbacks that, guys were having a lot of success in the NFL. And we had a schedule, and it was every Tuesday we got up in the team meeting room with a podium right after the coach, and all of the all your local media is there asking you questions about the prior game and an upcoming game. So I learned, from that of basically, okay, how are you going to deal with, I learned you don't need to answer a question. You just need to say something, and it may not be what they asking a question about, but it's you say what you want to be said on, maybe on that subject. I had a great sports information staff. Linda Venson would interview or tape all my interviews, and would be like, you said too much. You said, and it was great because, as a kid, you're like, oh, no, I was fine. You don't realize you're using crutch words over and over again. And when I watch kids now, and I could see, I'm like, man, they need somebody to coach, because it's an opportunity for me and for every player. Man, you're selling yourself, because in 5 or 10 years, you're not going to be playing the game, and you're going to need to go out in the real world and find a job, find something to do, and to be successful. And it's just great preparation for life. So we were, at least from the quarterback perspective, we were kind of trained on the media side. As the season progressed, I would say I was not the front runner at the start, and as we hit that stretch and we kept winning games, then that attention was building. So we'll be, hey, Gino, Jackaroot's in town. It's Tuesday. we're going to do an interview with him. And there was no concerted campaign. Like I remember Ty Detmer's, they sent out ties to all the voters, and Miami was like, we're not doing any campaign. We will make you accessible, but we will not overburden you if it's going to affect how you play. So it was basically essentially on a schedule, and I was cut off. I think it was by Thursday or Wednesday night. I think I was cut off totally, by maybe Thursday before practice, quick interview, but it wasn't anything that was big. So I had a schedule. Remember Chris Fowler came down one time, and I don't even know how they scheduled this, but friends of mine now, the Slater family had a big boat, had a couple boats. They got the Ibis, John Ruth, and Chris Fowler and I went out on one of their boats, and we were doing the interview in Biscayne Bay, which is, I'm like, you want to talk about making a recruiting video for Miami.
Mm-hmm.
Just do that. It's November, and you're doing the interview. And then a small boat came up behind the big boat with our Ibis out front with a fishing rod, and he had a sign that's on the fishing line said Torretta for Heisman. I mean, you know what I mean? Stuff
That's
like
awesome.
that. It wasn't me. It wasn't the university. It was, our mascot, our Ibis, putting the whole thing together. But those things, and I always took it as, okay, you're going to be interviewed every week, no matter what. And all of this is going to come to a screeching halt if you don't play well and you don't win. So really, the interviews didn't really affect me. I never really thought of, hey, this interview is gonna do it for me, because it wasn't. It was what I was doing on the field, and I didn't even think didn't really bother me. And it was such a routine, since it was my second year starting. That we just kind of went through it. And I, like I said, I had a great sports information staff, Linda Vincent and everybody, Larry Wall, all of them were outstanding. And then we all kind of worked together with Coach Erickson and he would be like, no, that's taking too much time, or, we're not going to do that. And, it all ended up working out.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that having that structure and that routine kind of continues. Whereas I'm sure other Heisman, candidates totally disrupted interviews at all hours, pressure externally that was just too much for them to handle. It seems like Miami, like you said, having had high profile quarterbacks, they understood the deal and they made it seamless for you where you could still continue doing what you're doing. I wanted to
You can
talk
never
about,
let the media drive you. You know what I mean? You
yes.
can't let the media drive whatever, if you gave yourself access, it doesn't matter in any field, there's going to be somebody trying to bother you at every point in the day, and you may feel obligated. And I knew, when you're younger, you can't really say no to people, and you don't know how to tactfully, I guess, say that. And it was like you said, it was very structured. They didn't put me in a bad situation where I had to say no to somebody. It was done, and this was the protocol.
So, Charles Woodson is, as you know, the only defensive player to have won the Heisman. Would you like to see more of that? Would you like to see defensive players highlighted, their stats highlighted, and potentially just like Charles Woodson win the Heisman?
Well, I would say this. I think that it goes to the most outstanding player. And as a defensive player, I've seen some players that I thought were deserving of being in New York, and they were in New York. Warren Sapp was in New York. He was fourth. And Ndamukong Suh, I think, ended up being third. The year he was up for it out of Nebraska, just a dynamic. Hutchinson last year was the runner up out of Michigan. I think that you will have players have opportunities. The hard part isn't, and I would say that really what did it for Charles was he was also a return guy.
Yep.
He was also, listen, there's make no bones about it. Michigan wanted to win the Heisman Trophy. They put him at wide receiver, and he was a good enough athlete that he could play wide receiver, he could play defensive back, he could play kick returner. So he was on the field enough to affect the game. I would say, let's say there's 80 plays in a game. If I'm on offense, I'm playing all 80 as a quarterback. And my receivers are playing pretty much all 80, and so are the running back. The skill guys are. you go in the trenches. Guys aren't playing. They can't play all 80 plays. I mean, they're getting double teamed. So their opportunity to affect the game as much as the guy that touches the ball every single play is much harder. You know, I think Will Anderson at Alabama this year is unbelievable defensive end, but you have to take breathers at some point in time. He'll take a breather. And you know what I mean? Maybe that was the play if he stayed in. You know, you create havoc. So I think for a defensive player to be able to win, it's either going to take somebody, you know, like a Lawrence Taylor, Warren Sapp, those guys where they're taking no plays off, and somehow, some way, maybe on a punt block, they're able to do something like that, or a skill guy defensively, like Charles, able to return some kicks. And that I just think it's hard to be recognized or noticed as much on defense as opposed to the guy that touches the ball every day at quarterback, or the guy he's throwing it to, or even the guy he's handing off to, you know, 30 times a game, because, you know, you're just not going to notice. I mean, if I'm playing against Charles Woodson, I'm not throwing the ball to his side.
Yeah, of course.
That just is what it is. So he's not going to, he will have affected the whole game plan. But as a fan, they're not going to know, well, Charles Woodson didn't make any plays. Well, he did, because we didn't throw over there. So we just, you know, we went the other way. So I think that, and also, you know, with regard to that, is I normally broadcast in a game every week on radio. Personally, I vote for the player that has the kind of the best performance that I've seen. I usually see the top players, top teams, and normally what I'll do is, based on their performance of what I've seen with my own eyes, make my vote. And it's not always the same as the top 3 or 4 that are there. I think people think also it's easy to vote for the Heisman at the end of the year. It's not very easy. It's not, you know, it's not you get a ballot and you either vote for a Democrat or a Republican or an independent. You get a ballot, and it's one line that says name, school. Number 2, name, school. 3, name, school. You can pick whoever you want. All they have to do is be an eligible athlete in NC2A. It can be, you know, an FCS team or whatever. So, you know, you can go wherever. And because of that, it's not, you have to pare your own list down. And it's difficult. I mean, look at the guys right now. There's probably 8 players, I'd say, that have a viable reason to be number 1. And then, okay, when that person's 1, who do you put 2? Who do you put 3? It's tough at the end of the year picking out that ballot.
Now, let me ask you, you made a statement. Should the Heisman Trophy go to the best player on the best team, or simply the best player? Because there's a lot of players that play on crappy teams that are unbelievable. And a lot of times what they'll say is it's much easier to win a Heisman when your team's winning a national championship, you're in the college football playoffs. What are your thoughts on best player, best team versus just strictly best player?
Well, I would say, one, this is what the trophy says. It says the most outstanding player. Doesn't say the best. Doesn't say, you know, hey, you're the greatest since sliced bread. It says most outstanding. Now, what somebody determines is most outstanding to them, like I said, I usually see most of the players, you know, firsthand, and their performance with my eyeballs weighs more heavily than other things. Is it hard to win a Heisman Trophy on a crappy team? Sure. You know, I think just it's probably as hard as winning a Heisman Trophy as a defensive player if you're not on a good team. But if you're in a Power 5 conference, you're going to have the opportunity, you know, to show out. Are you going to end up winning the Heisman? You know, probably not. I think that, listen, that's why players go to Miami, Alabama, USC. One, they want to win a national championship as a team, and they want to have an opportunity to win a Heisman or other awards. And then they also, you know, want to have a chance to move on to the National Football League. So I don't think, though, I mean, that's not how I vote. Do some people maybe vote like that if they're not a college football junkie, just kind of trying to pick the best player or the best team? Maybe they do that. I thought, you know, as we have gone to the conference championship game format, as opposed to before when there wasn't a game like that. That is an extra opportunity, because normally those teams, or a few of those teams, have somebody that has had that outstanding season that's in the mix.
Mm-hmm.
Well, that's another opportunity for them, with more eyeballs on a concentrated, without distractions of they're only watching their game, and then somebody can say, okay, that's the determining factor. I would say this year, Hendon Hooker, the quarterback from Tennessee, has had an unbelievable season, outstanding season. He's not going to be in the SEC championship game. What's going to happen against Georgia LSU? What's going to happen whoever wins Michigan, Ohio State? You know, in the Big Ten championship game, in the SEC championship game, the Pac-12 championship game, and if USC is able to do it, Caleb Williams has another opportunity. Drake May is the quarterback at North Carolina. He's got 40 touchdown passes as a redshirt freshman. What's going to happen? That's an extra opportunity that Hendon Hooker is not going to have. And it's no fault of his own. It's just, it is what it is. And I would say, like last year, if Bryce Young wasn't Houdini in the SEC champ. Well, he was Houdini two games for sure at the end of the year. I mean, he was just unbelievable. He had a great season, no question, but against Auburn, he was magical. And against the SEC championship game was magical. And I think ended up securing his, rightfully so. He was the most outstanding player from last year. But what if Alabama wasn't in the SEC championship game? What would the ballots have been? What if it's a whole maturation? What if Ohio State beat Michigan? Would Aiden Hutchinson been the runner up instead of, you never know. But those are things that, to me, as a voter, I don't put everything into one single game, but it is another opportunity for some of the best players and guys that have a chance to win it to basically win the trophy at the end of the year. And I don't know if you can change it and make the voting stop or start before the conference title games. But
yeah, I mean, there's just so many factors that play a role. Like you're saying, if Bryce Young doesn't win that game versus Auburn, they don't go to the SEC championship game, the odds of him winning the Heisman are pretty much zero.
Greatly diminished. Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And so, I'm going to ask you a tough question. Who do you think should win the Heisman this year? Actually, I'll make it easier. give me your top three. You don't got to pick one.
I see. That's the whole thing this year. Like, because here's what I would say. You can't win the Heisman in September. You can probably play your way out of it in September with a horrible start of the year. October, you kind of build your base. November is when you solidify and you put yourself in a position to win. And what does that mean? That means for, let's say, Caleb Williams at USC this year. He's got UCLA, rivalry game. All eyeballs are going to be on this weekend. And then they play Notre Dame next weekend. He's going to have those two opportunities, no questions asked, that to put an arm on the trophy or a hand on it and grab it and say, this is mine this season. May from North Carolina. He's going to be playing Clemson in the ACC championship game. That's going to be his opportunity. Talked about Hooker, who's there, but how does the race change when we throw in the extra game of the conference championship games? I think it will change some. It just kind of depends on, what those performances look at. Dugan's at TCU is in that mix. Stetson Bennett's had a great year. Blake Corum at Michigan is CJ Stroud. I will say that CJ Stroud, I thought last year was going to win the Heisman in probably the early part of November. They played Michigan State, and I broadcast that game. He had 6 touchdowns in a quarter and a half. And I was like, this kid's unbelievable. He just won it. And then, Bryce Young, closer to the vote, does what he does at the end of the year, and he ends up winning it. So I think that, Stroud, out of Michigan, Ohio State, is the loser of that game out, both as a team and as their top player. You're going to have Corum at running back. What if he has a great game and wins at Michigan on the road, or Stroud, wins at home with Ohio State? So I think that there are so many things that, and it's a great thing about college football. It's just, man, there are so many things that you're like, okay, we only have a couple games left. The season's over with. But the top 4 are going to change. Who's going to win the Heisman Trophy is going to completely change. What I always hope for at least at this point, as we finish a season, is I hope it's not a bad performance by one of these kids. Like the pressure either got to them, or maybe the other team was better, and the media just doesn't. Well, he lost he lost the Heisman Trophy. And it's like, well, he's not trying to play bad. He just had a bad game. And what I hope is they all have their great games, and it makes it tough on the voter to say who is number one, because it's like I said, it's not easy picking out the best 3 players or most outstanding 3 players at the end of the year.
I mean, it's going to be exciting to see, just like you said, who kind of shines under that spotlight, because it's about putting up numbers in front of a national limelight, not just a small conference game, but a actual conference championship. And but let me just switch here towards the end. I do want to get your opinion about the current Hurricanes football situation that is so controversial. Depends on who you ask. What are your thoughts on the current Miami Hurricanes football situation? Are they on the way back? What needs to happen to bring back the U? And how are they doing overall?
Well, I think this season has obviously been disappointing, with bringing Mario back, and we have a new coach, new staff. And I think the fans thought we were closer, to having a better season and a better team. I think that from the standpoint of, it's unfair to any coach at anywhere to say, well, this isn't going to work out in the course of 10 games. Mario's had success. He had success down the road at FIU. He had success at Oregon. I would say this: it's normally not the X's and the O's wherever you're at. It's the Jimmies and the Joes, the guys that run between them white lines for 60 minutes on a Saturday. And I think he is a relentless recruiter. And the great thing that I think is for us, and for anything, like if you're in sales, he doesn't need to learn a sales pitch. Like, somebody's not, here, Mario, here's a PowerPoint about the University of Miami. This is what you need to sell, or this is what you can sell to get them to come here. He grew up right here. His older brother went to school here. He went to school here. He doesn't need to learn any sales pitch. So what he is saying is something that he's already bought. You know what I mean? All he's reiterating is what Coach Johnson, I don't know who recruited him on our staff. Tony Wise was the offensive line coach, Arkeel, Wanstead, Butch Davis. All he's doing is repeating what we heard from all of those coaches when we were 17 years old coming out of high school and when we got here. So, and then to hear Dennis Erickson and his staff for 4 years, and then to come back and GA under Butch. So he's lived it, he's breathed it, he's bought it. He's bought it. And to me is, he knows exactly what this place can be, what this place is, the potential it is. But it comes down to getting players and recruiting players. And I think that he will not sleep until he gets those players. And it just doesn't happen overnight. Hopefully with the transfer portal thing, there are so many things going on in college football right now with what I would say is free agency. and listen, I'm glad the kids all are able to make a few dollars with NIL and things like that. But the coaching, it's like you have to re-recruit your own players, it seems like, on any team every single week. I mean, who would have ever thought, Jordan Addison, best receiver in Pitt's at Pitt last year, wins the Blitnikoff Award and transfers, goes to USC the next year. I mean, that wouldn't ever happen when I was in school. I mean, when I was in school, if you left, you had to sit out a year. I thought about transferring from Miami because I had started, like I said, 4 years as a redshirt freshman, broke the school record for passing. I'm like, man, I can go anywhere in the country. If I could play quarterback at Miami, I can play anywhere. But then you had the way of, well, if I go somewhere else, I got to sit out a year. Now it's, if I go somewhere else, am I, can I play next week? That's kind of how it is. So I think they've cut those windows down of when the kids can transfer in that. But I think that, coaches will utilize that, and I'm sure Mario will utilize that this year to supplement, the roster. And also, I mean, see, I have one class, and last year there was a lot of great players, that high-ranking kids that came in. He's got a bunch of guys committed and that have recommitted to him, even with not a great season. And I just think that he, I would say it's probably not worked to him, because he's not really selling anything that he hasn't bought before. You like selling your own place.
Yeah, I would like to believe that the U is going to be back. And listen, Gino, thank you so much for your time. It is great hearing about your Heisman year, the team that you had, your kind of mental fortitude, how you stayed focused despite all the pressure. Just hoping that Miami turns it around. I know that everyone here in South Florida kind of wants the U back, and every time there's promise, people get super hyped. And like you said, it takes time. We gotta stay focused, and hopefully
They will. And again,
Warriors.
listen, with coaching change, normally there's not coaching change with success. And I think here at Miami, we had success with coaching change, but it wasn't, we were having changes because the team wasn't doing great. We had changes because, well, where did Howard Schnellberger go? He went to the USFL. He went to the professional ranks. Where did Jimmy Johnson go? He went to the Cowboys. He went to professional ranks. What did Dennis Erickson? They were moving onward, upward in a time when, NFL coaches were making significantly more than college coaches, and now that isn't the case anymore.
Yeah.
So we had success even with turnover, because, hey, they had done their job. They had kept us at a certain level, and I think that's the grass isn't always green on the other side. I mean, there's whether it's here, heck, Tennessee went through it for a bunch of years, different coaches. Florida, I'd probably say, is going through it. Since Spurrier, you got to find. I mean, Alabama
Yeah.
they won a title my senior year in '92 and didn't do anything again until Nick Saban came in, and there was a lot of years between that success. So I think that it's going to take time, and hopefully with transfer portal it'll be shorter. But this place, there's no better city in America when Miami Hurricanes win. There's that's why I tell all these kids, I'm like, you come here and win. Where do you want to live the rest of your life? You would want to live right here, and you'll be forever immortalized in the greatest city in America.
Love hearing that. Listen, I'm gonna throw up a you, buddy. I'm gonna throw up a you.
There we go.
Thanks for your time, man. Have an awesome weekend.
All right, Doc. Thanks.
Thanks, man. Thanks for your time.